Hello, welcome to the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. I am your host, Roy Kessel, and we are very excited today to have with us Scott McClellan. Scott is the Executive Director of Heart of the City, and we're really interested to learn more about the great work that he's doing. But Scott, I want to take you back to your childhood. We appreciate you jumping in with us today and sharing your story, but what got Scott started on his passion for sports?
Well, first of all, thank you, Roy, for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share a story about Heart of the City, and subsequently, I guess, a little bit about myself and how we got to this point. Passion for sports, just as I would say middle school, had a group of friends that we always played, home run derby, tag football, things of that sort. And in eighth grade, I had the first opportunity to put on football pads and play on the freshman football team, and really enjoyed that experience. And that's kind of when I first fell into love with football. Had always played basketball as a kid. Really wasn't very good, I would say probably until high school. I went to two different high schools. In Lincoln, Rhode Island is where I graduated from. I actually did my freshman year there and my senior year there. And then I spent 2 years in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And that's kind of really where things changed for me. I used to go to the Boys and Girls Club in Allentown, and we would go there after school and play basketball every single day. I had a really strong group of friends. And, it was during those years that I had a tough time at home. Subsequently ended up having, ran away from home, sleeping on the street, sleeping in my friends' basements in the back of the Boys and Girls Club. And, the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club, his name is Dave Ross, found out about this and got together with other staff and figured out how they were going to get me through the rest of my junior year back to Rhode Island and graduate from high school. And the reason why I share that is because I went to the Boys and Girls Club because it was the place to go play sports, and it was a safe place to play sports. And that is kind of like the catalyst, safe and an opportunity to connect with people. So I transferred back to Lincoln in Rhode Island, and was unable to play my senior year of football because of the transfer rule. And but I still stayed on the team and practiced every single day, even though I couldn't play a game my entire high school senior year. Because I loved the game so much, and I loved being out with my friends. I loved having the family. I felt like teammates were that family that I didn't really have at the time, because I was living in a foster home that year. So it's funny, I tell this story, in high school, I didn't have a chance to play my senior year in football. And then I got to play, I don't know, maybe 10 games of my senior year in basketball because of the time that had elapsed. And I have 4 statistics for high school basketball, which was 2 rebounds and 2 block shots. That's all I have. And when I tell that story, people are, a little surprised by it, and because I ended up playing at a Division II, college. Like, how does that kind of translate? The guy that was going to the church I was going to was the manager of the team in Florida. Had me go down there to visit the school right before, the beginning of the semester. No idea what was going to happen. I just showed up there, talked to the coach, and tried out and walked on the team. It's really bizarre. Like, I didn't even have, I hadn't even been enrolled in school. I didn't know, how I was going to get paid for or any of it. I just showed up down in Lakeland, Florida. And then, had a great fun my freshman year. I guess too much fun because I didn't do any of the schoolwork, and ended up having to, drop out of school. And that was a really a real slap in the face for me, or a wake up call, because now the one thing that I loved so much was taken away from me, but it was only taken away from me because of, me not, holding my end of the bargain. So, I subsequently ended up being able to transfer to Olivet Nazarene University. Coach Ralph Hodge gave me an opportunity again to walk on the team, and after I made it, he gave me a scholarship, and ended up playing 3 years for him. And the sport for me was like this. It was like a guide for me, because I love sport so much. I love to be involved in it so much. And the only way you could do that is what? You got to do your classwork. You got to be eligible. And so I go back to saying, like, if I didn't have basketball, I would have never got through college. I just wouldn't have. It was the one thing that motivated me that much. Being with teammates, traveling around, the country, airplanes, hotels, California, Hawaii, Florida, Louisiana, just that experience to do all of that was because of basketball. And, what year is this right now? I'm lost. 2022. Three of my roommates, when I was at Olivet, I still am in contact with today. One of them lives in Australia. He was our center of our basketball team. Another one lives in Indiana, and another one is here in Illinois. And those relationships that were built over that time, 26 years later, we're still friends. We're still close. And to me, that's like the power of sport.
Well,
so
you've touched on so many important areas there that you talk about the power, and just listening to that journey. What hit me the most is your discussion about that framework, right? That support system of going to practice even though you couldn't play, because that's what felt like home. That was your people that you wanted to interact and engage with, and then the opportunities that sport gave you to travel and go places that you hadn't had an opportunity, and experience things that you hadn't an opportunity to do previously. I think that's something that often gets underestimated. People only look, you hear so often from the fan world, right? Like, what's the point, Scott? Why are you even playing? You're not going to make the NFL, or you're not going to make the NBA. And you look at every single one of these players that plays in college at every level, right? D1, D2, D3, NAIA, JUCOs. They're having fun. They're playing the sport because they love playing, just like most of us played rec leagues or park district or house leagues and played to adult. I still play a lot of sports, right? I'm not getting paid, unfortunately, for that, but
right.
I would have done a lot better if I got paid for all of those sports.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's funny, when I was asked to cut, the backtrack real quick, I spent 20 years working at Boys and Girls Clubs before coming to heart of the city. And, I referenced that because if you go back to what I said earlier, the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club was, that father that I didn't have, and was, essentially saved my life and put me on the path of to be in the world of social work, which is what my major was. And I chose that career because I had an opportunity to give back to kids because of what it did for me in my life. And And when I had a chance to come to Heart of the City, I was given this opportunity because I believed in sport. Now, I need to be completely transparent. When I took this job, I really didn't know anything about the game of soccer. But I wasn't really, I wasn't hired here to teach the game of soccer. I was hired here to be able to build this organization into a youth development program that supports the growth of young people and puts them on a path for success that they didn't even know was available. And so it's been an interesting journey the last 4.5 years because, there was a rec league program that was here. They were trying to blend, the travel league play and didn't really have, the bones that they were looking for. And we were able to put a team together, great staff here, who have been able to develop quality programming with mission-driven activities. And that to me is like the most important thing. Like, how do we create this organic program that touches on the things we learn with the game, which is teamwork, competitiveness, learning how to work with each other, trying to figure out ways to accomplish a common goal, adversity. If you're on a team that loses, like, how do you bounce back? All the things that, these are cliche things that we say, but it's true, right? So how do we take that experience? How do we take, a college visit to CLC or Lake Forest College or DePaul? How do we expose kids to a different world that they didn't know was there? It's not really about the game of soccer so much as it is a vehicle. And so, one of the staff members said this yesterday as we were interviewing with somebody that, soccer is the vehicle, but Heart of the City is the bridge to what could be on the other side.
And I want to back you up for just a minute because you and I, have interacted and know more about a little bit more about the program. But for our viewers and listeners, I want to take you back to the beginning of Heart of the City and have you give an overview of where you're located, what type of size organization you are, and the geographic focus you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So Heart of the City is a youth development organization based out of Waukegan, Illinois. We serve predominantly Waukegan, Zion, North Chicago, Round Lake, and Gurnee is probably that's the bulk of the towns that we serve. We have taken the model, the club sport model. So we have club soccer teams, HOTC Elite, and we participate in IYSA, Illinois Youth Soccer Association. And we have boys teams, girls teams, and we have a spring, we have a fall, winter, spring seasons. We provide opportunities for kids to go to showcases and tournaments. The catch here is, it's only $500 to participate in the club sport, which is peanuts if you look at what a lot of other clubs are charging. And we cover, like I said, league fees, your transportation to games, whether it's a van, whether it's a bus, whether it's an airplane, hotels, food, lodging, all of that type of stuff that we supply for kids that wouldn't normally have that opportunity.
Right. And for those that are not familiar with the club sport, especially in the soccer space, right, in the northern, Chicago suburban area, the package Scott's describing, I would say, realistically, is in the $3,000 to $5,000 range, per player per year in terms of what that would cost if a family were to fund those things out of pocket.
Right. But on top of just like having, a club opportunity for kids at a very affordable rate, whether it's that gets scholarshiped or, we provide payment plans so you don't have to come up with a chunk right away. On top of that, we have our college and career readiness program, which when you come into the program, yes, you're playing soccer, but you're required to do volunteer hours because we think it's super important for kids to learn to give back, whether or not they come from a rich community or a community where it's not. We provide opportunities for SAT support. We support kids through the financial aid process, the application process, job shadowing at different companies. On top of that, we also give our kids opportunities to become certified as referees and coaches. And then once they get those certifications, we also have an academy program, and that's where our high schoolers who get certified would then come and coach and referee, where they would get paid. So it's kind of like this full circle opportunity that they play for us. They get a teachable credential, and then we put them in a position to make an earning in an environment that they love. Because going back to what you said, not everyone's going to go play pro, right? But a lot of kids want to be around the game of sport, whatever sport it is. And so maybe you're not going to be a athlete, but you can be a coach. You could be a commentator. You could be a referee. Like, there's so many other options. And that's what we want to do, is expose kids to options and then put them on the pathway to get there. One other thing that I want to say about our program that's super unique is we use honest game. And why we do that is because we have kids that would come to us, and a college coach would say, you know what, Roy, I'm going to give you a scholarship to come play for me. And then when I see your transcripts, well, Roy, you took four Englishes in high school, but you took English 101 2 times, and you needed 4 levels of English. Well, guess what? According to NCAA regulations, you're not going to be able to play next year. You're going to have to sit out a semester. And Scott over here, who's not as good as you, but Scott will be eligible. I got to give Scott that scholarship money because I got to put him on the field. I can't put you on the field, so I can't give you money. And that happens to a lot of our kids, where they didn't know that they were on track or not on track. They just were doing what they thought was right. And, guidance counselors are overloaded in our country. You got one guidance counselor to 300-400 kids. Kids are going to slip through the cracks, unfortunately. And now these kids lose out. So what we do is we track all their transcripts. And if a kid is not on track, we connect with teachers, we connect with parents, and we get a printout of the classes that Roy would need to take in his high school, and ensure that you get that class, so that way when you do graduate, you have all the eligible classes needed. So we're not just a soccer organization. We do so many other things. We provide support to resources, food insecurities, mental health, regular health. We actually just started a partnership with Rosalind Franklin, where their doctor is in here on Mondays to see any injured student athletes, and does their physical therapy, prescribes treatments, all those things that our kids might not have because they might have the quality insurance. And so now you don't get the rehab, and now you miss out on opportunities. So we do a lot more than just give kids a chance to play a sport.
Well, I think that's really important. So in so many organizations, right, the focus is entirely on the sport, and certainly from what you do, taking the kids traveling to those showcases and tournaments and everything, there's a huge focus on soccer. But what really strikes me is the depth of the programming that you have behind that, because what you're talking about in terms of kids and their eligibility, because they're not staying on track with classes and therefore might not be able to get into a college or to have immediate eligibility, right? You're serving, in a sense, like the NCAA clearinghouse for making sure that these kids are staying with those target and with that program, and that they're taking the opportunity to go ahead and really look at what the model is to keep that track, right? And when you talk about the other services you mentioned, mental health and food security and other things like that, those are things that are so important for the kids as they are doing things and learning. And I think the challenge is people don't see that, right? Somebody looks at it and they see one of your teams competing at a tournament. They don't understand that the soccer part, right, is the proverbial tip of the iceberg in terms of the programming and the substance of what you provide there.
Yeah, you're right. I think it does go unnoticed, and we don't publicize that stuff for the sake of publicizing it. We just do it because it needs to be done. But if you think about a kid, and I learned this a lot when I was at the Boys and Girls Club, you get kids, you got a kid that who's 12 and might have a 10-year-old sibling and a 8-year-old sibling, and mom or dad, leave in the morning to go to work because, they're working 2 jobs. And so that 12-year-old is responsible to getting himself or herself and the 2 siblings to school, right, in the morning. So now these kids might have eaten maybe a bowl of cereal if they're lucky. They try to get to school early because the school provides breakfast for some kids. But if you think about all that trauma that 12-year-old is going through in the morning to get him or herself ready and their siblings, and then they're in the classroom and they're hungry, they've slept in substandard housing, and then we have this expectation that a kid is going to be successful in the classroom, but the kid is living in a space where, how can we expect that? And so we look at it the same way. We want kids to be able to be successful post high school, but if they don't have the resources, like the health resources, the mental health resources, the activity, the running around, like the activity, the health side of that, an opportunity to talk to an adult about what's going on. If we don't provide that for kids, how do we expect that they're going to be successful when they graduate? I mean, we have kids that graduate who drop out after the first semester because they're not classroom ready.
Well, you talked about so many factors that go into someone's ability to learn in school, right? And you talked about that journey that they take every morning just to get themselves ready. Maybe they're helping other siblings get ready, what they have to go through at home, the transportation to get there, whether they've been properly had an opportunity to sleep and rest, whether they've had an opportunity to eat and be nourished. But you can't function, your body and mind can't function, especially as you're growing and developing at an optimal level. And yet so many of the schools, right, aren't aware of what's going on in a child's home. And I think until very recently, it was something that was sort of taboo to talk about or ask unless it was brought to you. And I think it's only in relatively recent times that the schools would reach out and try and find, like, okay, Scott, I see that you're struggling in class, or, and speaking to a lot of teachers, we hear the stories where kids will come to class and the schools have a prohibition in many schools against the teachers providing any food or snacks or anything to the child for liability purposes and allergies and everything else. And it's like, you have a child that can't function, hasn't eaten anything. And I know teachers that would keep protein bars and other reasonably healthy things to give to the kids. And, they're like, I'll take the risk that I get in trouble with my school because it's more important to me that this child can have something to eat and be nourished, and I want them to be able to function and learn.
Yeah, no, I'm in 100% agreement with you. I remember, seeing kids walking home at 9:30 at night without a coat on, and there's a foot of snow on the ground, and I'm driving, and the rule is you don't put kids in your car because There's liability for yourself. You know, they could say something, you could get into an accident. And then sometimes you got to make that decision. Am I going to go ahead and risk those things because there's a life right here who does not have adequate clothing and it's 20 degrees out, right?
Right. And it's hard. It's sad that we've got to a point in society where we're scared to do the right thing and scared to help because there's so many examples of, as you said, putting somebody in a car, somebody who's a predator, somebody who may have bad intentions with that child. And just like when I was growing up, I'm sure very similar to you, right? We're drummed into our heads like, don't take a ride from a stranger, don't
Right.
take candy from a stranger. And how do you separate that out if you're a child and you're walking at night without a coat? And in many cases, right, we've seen this, people without coats, without gloves, without hats. You know, you can drive around with a trunk full of those things and hand them out, but then you're still leaving them on the side of the road. And
we haven't fixed the problem. We've just band-aided it. You know, so I guess I was kind of sharing that because I wanted to kind of circle back to the reason why we're talking, and it's the first word in your title, which is sports. When a kid, and obviously I know there's adults that play sports, but when kids play sports, you build a support network around them. So a kid is on a team here, you have a coach. Like a prime example, when we find out that a kid is couch surfing because something happened at home, but we find it out because there's a relationship with that coach. And it's not like the coach is like hunting for it, but when you create that environment, that safe space, the coach is such a vital piece to a kid's success. And that coach, you know, sends that message up the chain and we figure it out. But team, you know, it's another family. It's, you know, I remember like those 3 years I was at Olivet, that was my team. I mean, holidays together, you know, you're traveling together, you're having those conversations, you're in each other's weddings, you know, you're going to funerals. I mean, all of it, like it becomes like your family, and kids should have that opportunity because it could do so much more than just what happens on the court or on the field.
Yeah, and we know sports have an incredible power to bring people together, to build those relationships, to teach the skills that are needed to be successful in life. If you look at communication and teamwork and humility and other things that come along with sports, right? Anybody that's played any significant amount of sports, you've hopefully had some successes, but definitely you've had some failures and challenges and things, obstacles that you have to overcome from a sport. And it teaches you the same thing in life. When you look around, you shared part of your journey and the challenge of grades and how that made you go back and refocus. Every single person, if you pull them aside and dive into the path and their journey, there have been obstacles that they've had to overcome. You may not be aware of them, but they're there. And I think that one of the great things that we see with the athletes and the organizations that come and talk to us is their willingness to be transparent and open up about that, because it's such a great way for others to be able to relate to that and see like, okay, I'm not a complete failure in 8th grade and my life isn't over because I screwed something up in middle school or high school or college. Right? You have examples of people that have been, you know, proverbial failures at those stages of their life, and you look at what they're doing today and their incredible successes, and they've really transformed their lives, and it's never too late.
You know, one of the things that stands out for me in sport is the lessons that I learned from my college coach. I remember, you know, after my last game, a week goes by, you know, you're done with the tears and you get back to like the real world. And he calls all the seniors in one by one and has lunch with you and sits down and talks to you about life. And why he did, why he coached the way he did, why he was tough, why he kind of, I don't want to say treated us because that's not the right word. But his whole goal was not necessarily to create basketball players. His whole goal was to create young men that would develop into men and be good dads, could be husbands, good professionals in the business world. And when Coach Hodge passed away a couple of years ago, it's interesting, there was a Facebook chain that went around, and everybody that had played for him over the 38 years or so that he was coaching, anyone that was a former Tiger, they were in on that chain. And all the stories were the same. We talked about, times he was hollering and screaming at us, but at the end of the day, everybody had the same kind of relationship, which was he was trying to create men, and it wasn't about the sport. And that's what coaches do. And that's to me is like the catalyst of sport is you get put into this space, you compete, you develop relationships, but you develop as a human. And that is why, to me, like the coach, the institution of coach, to me, is so sacred. And we see on TV where, professional players are yelling at coaches and not listening to what's going on. And it's just, to me, it's disgusting because of how important I think a coach can be in the life of a young person. And we want to make sure that we are teaching our kids to respect the institution of the coach because of what it can do for them. And I think that's, for me, if that was the one message, is our coaches develop relationships and they want to teach these young people how to become positive contributors to our world.
Well, and I think that point about coaches is so critical because it's not only the big name coaches, not only the head coaches. In so many of these environments, it's the assistant coach, maybe a strength and conditioning coach, somebody that is coaching the player and really connects and relates to the player that has that impact. And so, I think one of the challenges we've seen it lately is something like the portal in NCAA now, the transfer portal, where it used to be, if I don't like Scott as a coach or I don't love where I stand as a program, I have two options. I can quit or I can work harder and try and get back on Scott's good side and see that I'm really dedicated and committed. And one of the things I don't love in the transfer portal, there's many things that I think are good, but one thing I don't like is that I think that there's too much now of people looking at it and saying, I don't love where I am today. The grass is greener somewhere else, and I'm going to leave. I'm not going to work harder. I'm not going to fight for that starting position. I'm just going to leave and go somewhere else. And that's a message I don't like. I think the ability for players to have some flexibility and transfer and find a better fit is terrific. I just think it's a little bit right now, and maybe it'll come to an equilibrium in time when people see that if you look at the data over a few years, that it didn't always end well for everybody that went to the transfer portal. But right now, I think people see that as the proverbial get out of jail free card. Like, I don't like this situation. You're being mean to me. You don't appreciate what I'm doing, so I'm just going to go somewhere else.
The generation of kids and mentality in 2022 is so different than it was in 1988. I mean, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. Yeah, but I just, sports to me, it's funny, as soon as the NBA playoffs are over, we have that, I'm not a huge baseball fan. Like, I'll go to a game, but you have like that 7-week period before the NFL season kicks off. And so, I find myself watching, curling and things like that, just to like.
We could get some tennis and golf and MLS in there. They'd have something to say, but this is Roy Kessel, your host, sitting with Scott McClellan, Executive Director of Heart of the City. And Scott, before we let you go, I want to make sure you get an opportunity to let people know how to reach you or how to get more information about the organization.
Yeah, you can go on our website, which is heartofthecitysports.org, or our Facebook page, which is just Heart of the City. You can find us there on LinkedIn, Instagram, all those social media sites. But if you just type in Heart of the City in Waukegan, that's where you are, and you can find our information. My email is scott@hotcsoccer.org. So if you want to, reach out that way, feel free. Roy, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
So before we let you go, I want to put you on the hot seat for just a minute. We're going to use our sports philanthropy superpowers and wave our magic wand. And we're going to appoint Scott as a commissioner of a sport. So tell me what sport you would choose.
I would be the commissioner of the WNBA.
Okay, so you're taking over the WNBA, and now in your first act of office, you walk in and take over. So what are you going to change?
Well, the first thing I'm going to change is how the money comes in and how we increase the revenue so that our players get the same, I guess, for lack of a better words, the same dollars that we're given to the men. And the reason why I'm bringing this up right now, because there's a hot button issue that's happening in the world right now. Brittany Griner is over in jail in Russia, right? And she's a superstar, one of the best players in the world. And the fact that Brittany has to go to Russia to make $1 million because she can't make $1 million in the United States, which is the richest country in the world, is absolutely ridiculous. I'm not saying that it's bad to play in another country. I'm saying that if she wants to make the same amount of money as the men do, she's got to go to Russia. And let's be honest, things aren't, awesome in Russia right now, right?
Yeah,
so why?
It's challenging.
That needs to be changed. So to me, that's what I would focus on, is how do we just have a basketball league where everyone gets the same? It's ridiculous.
So I think it's a great platform. We were just up at the women's Final Four up in Minneapolis. Had a chance to hear Candace Parker at a special media event with Adidas. Great event, and she was there talking about some of these same issues with a panel, and it was really impressive to see what was going on at the women's Final Four. And in fact, for those that hadn't had an opportunity to see, Minneapolis and the Target Center did such an impressive job with that women's Final Four that the Big Ten has now moved some of the men's and women's basketball tournaments up to Minneapolis in the coming years. So the events were all sold out, and I think women's sports is on that trajectory, getting more exposure. Still a long way to go. We're celebrating 50 years of Title IX this year, and we've come a long way, but we still are scratching the surface of where we need to be. So, Scott, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. For all of our viewers and listeners, this is Roy Kessel signing off for the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Please remember to live generously. Thank you.